Welcome to another episode of the Milwaukee Sports Performance Podcast. My name is Michael Falk, and I'm joined today by Dr. Brett Ferstl, and we are going to talk about how a physical therapist prepares for the Murph workout. So, Brett, welcome. Thank you for taking some time to come and talk about your training.
Yeah, I always like talking about training in general, especially when it's my own. So this will be a good one, I think.
Yeah, awesome. I know you're always looking for a challenge, but could you just even tell us a little bit about kind of some of your fitness journey and then like how long you've done the Murph, maybe what the Murph is if someone's not familiar with it?
Yeah, I'll keep it relatively brief, but in general, I used to be a competitive athlete ever since. I like to find different types of challenges. And that's been all over the spectrum from when I was 18, I actually did like a bodybuilding show. I don't know if you actually knew that. And then as I got a little bit older, I started to get into more of power-based lifting, and I'll lump that into like the Olympic lifts. So 4 years ago, I did a weightlifting competition too, and that was just like the fun challenge for that time. And then ever since, because that training's been really tough, or I just like to try new stuff, it's just been different stuff. So sometimes it's running a race, like usually shorter distance from a mile for time up to 10K is the furthest I've done. And then also doing like a duathlon, so a biking and running race. And then just amidst there, I always like to have some certain goal to work towards, whether that's on a bench, I want to see what I can get. That's like my main focus with training. Or maybe it's trying to dunk, or if there's something new coming up, like right now it's the Murph, I'm really dedicating a lot of my training towards doing the best I can at that, because I'm a person that's always enjoyed training, but I think it's a lot more fun. It makes me more accountable when I actually have a goal in mind.
How many times have you done the Murph now?
I think it's either 2018 or 19 was my first, so 6 or 7, somewhere right in that range.
Awesome. And if someone's not familiar, like what is the Murph? How did it get started?
Yep. Could be corrected on this one, but to my knowledge, there was a Marine that ended up doing this one workout that he died, I think, in combat. So this workout was named after him, hence the Murph. I think the guy's name was Murphy or something Murphy. But essentially what it is, it's something you can do with essentially just body weight and a pull-up bar. So it starts out with a 1 mile run, and then you have to do 100 pull-ups, 200 push-ups, 300 air squats, and then another 1 mile run. CrossFit really adopted it and they make it into a competition. And essentially you can modify it however you would need to, depending on like your fitness level. So to my knowledge, like the actual version of the Murph includes wearing a 20-pound weight vest, and you have to do it all in that order. Versus in the past, I've never worn a weight vest, and I've broken it up as a circuit between the pull-ups, the push-ups, and the squats. So for example, you might do 10 pull-ups, 20 push-ups, 30 squats, and then do that 10 times. But you still will always start with the 1 mile run and then finish with a 1 mile run too.
Wow. Definitely a unique challenge. I'm sure just different than what anybody does in a normal day of training, and a unique thing to put your body through. What have you found when you've done it previously to be like the hardest part about doing the Murph?
In the versions that I've done, when I do circuit it together, it's like the cardio. Yes, the muscular endurance is really hard, but when you start with a 1 mile run and you hit it pretty hard, like heart rate's already at a pretty high level, and then you just go right into a circuit and you never really get a break. And so that's usually crushed me the most, is just heart rate is at a really high level for the whole time. And that's one thing that we'll talk about a little bit, but this year of training, I'm trying to do it not breaking it up. And so the cardio aspect hasn't been the biggest challenge for me. It's been very different, even though it might not seem like that much, but in the past, absolutely cardio.
Okay, interesting. So let's put your physical therapist hat on now. What mistakes do you see people make when they're preparing their body to try to do the Murph?
I could see it going one of two ways for the most part. One, people work out, so they think, I want to do this challenge and I can do it. And I might do push-ups every now and then, or I do like bench press, or I might do like rows and I squat. But it's very different when you're doing it body weight into that volume and you're doing it for time. So you're trying to get this done as fast as you can. So just like lifting weights often doesn't cut it. So I'd say the first mistake is not preparing well enough. But then I think you can get to the other end of the spectrum, that you have people that are really competitive and they probably just do way too much and they essentially aren't recovering well enough. And then that will affect slow injuries start to creep up, or their performance when it comes to the Murph is probably going to be hindered just because they've been doing too much. So there is a sweet spot to it.
Yeah, for sure. It's the Goldilocks theory of training of don't do too little, don't overdo it. Try to thread the needle right through the middle.
Exactly.
So when you were evaluating, okay, you've done the Murph, this is going to be your 7th time or whatnot, and you're evaluating like my strengths and weaknesses and what areas do I need to focus on, how did you assess yourself and how have you designed your training plan around it?
The first bit will go into what did my training look like over last summer and fall to prepare me like up to starting the Murph training. And it consisted of a lot of running and biking. So I thought that my cardio level and even like lower body endurance was probably at a relatively decent spot, but I wasn't doing that much for high volume upper body work. So I just guessed that my upper body would probably be the place that's lagging behind. But then as I started to like just incorporate more pull-ups and more push-ups, I had a test day where I didn't do a full-on Murph, but I would just do like half of it. And then that gave me a chance to see where was I the slowest, where did I really have to prioritize working on. And then since then, it's had a little bit more area of focus. And I was right. It seems like my pull-ups and push-ups are the one that's lagging behind. My running's pretty much fine. My squats, they progressed really well, so I'm at where I need to be now. But it's definitely the upper body endurance and strength for it.
That's interesting. This is, I think, why it goes back to like really smart to test where you are. Didn't you like do a pull-up challenge last year where you tried to do 1,000 pull-ups in a week or something like that? I would have guessed that was a strength of yours.
Yeah, and it's not like it's a crazy weakness, but like proportionally it is. And yeah, it was last summer. I did do 1,000 in a week. So that was basically 150 a day. So I do think it helped my base of being able to do pull-ups, but also I took like a 6-month hiatus where I was not doing high volume of pull-ups. So I also learned a good amount from doing those pull-ups, which I want to talk about what my trainings looked like. Because like I can do a lot of pull-ups, but I had some like small injuries that did creep up, and knowing that I was going to have to train to do more volume, I wanted to make sure like I kept them at bay. And I was still nursing it, to be honest, for a while. But I had some strategies to try to help with that, and knock on wood, so far, like that small injury's been gone, but I'm consistently working to make sure it stays at bay too.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's a perfect segue. Like what kind of has been your strength and conditioning plan or some of those tips that you've been using to just try to stay healthy during the training phase?
Yeah, I'll start with kind of the injury that I dealt with while doing all of those pull-ups. It is essentially just like an overuse injury where you have tendons on the inside and outside of the elbow that just got overused and very flared up to the point that those can be pretty sharp if any listeners have ever dealt with a tennis elbow, golfer's elbow type thing. And what I would find in hindsight of how I used to do pull-ups, and even while I had pain, it was a good feedback of if I did it a certain way, it'd feel better. If I did them a different way, it would aggravate my pain. And I found out that when I was doing my pull-ups, I was using like a lot of my arm and not as much as like my main prime mover of being like my lat. And so when I actually started to reintegrate a lot more volume of pull-ups in this training, although I can do several pull-ups, I actually did them feet assisted because it gave me a chance to not really stress using my arm as much. And I could get just like a better feeling of trying to use my lat, which should be a main mover for the pull-up. And even still at this point, months into training for it, I have one day that's like my Murph day, and then I have 2 other days that I still do my feet assisted pull-ups because I can still make them really challenging for me, but it's a different feeling to make sure that I'm not trying to overuse my forearms.
Interesting.
Any questions on that? Otherwise, I'm going to move into what my trainings looked like too.
Why don't you give me the breakdown of how you've done your training phases and scheduled your week?
Yeah. So might seem excessive too, but I started low level training for this probably back in like October. And the Murph isn't until Memorial Day, which is in May. But I did this for 2 reasons. One, I was excited to start the training for it. I knew I wanted to do the Murph this Memorial Day in this specific way. So I was excited to just get going. And then knowing that I had previous injuries dealing with a high volume of pull-ups, I wanted to really take my time progressing for it. And so it's been like 5 months, but it's been pretty slow in how I've progressed it. I don't think there's an incredibly right and wrong way to prep for training necessarily, but this is just the way that I've chosen to do and progress it. As long as there's a plan behind it, I think that's the most important thing. But essentially what I did is back in October, I printed out calendars, which I actually brought with me today because I like to keep track of it this way. But I write down like Memorial Day is the Murph, and then I backtrack what do I want to be achieving the weeks leading up to that, and then work all the way back to October. And then essentially now I have a month by month plan that theoretically I want to try to make sure I'm on track with, or if I fall behind, I know that either something might creep up or I need to make some adjustments, but it just keeps me accountable of not progressing too fast while making sure I'm on the same rate too. So what I did initially is I would just have one day a week that was like my Murph day. And what I started out was I gave myself 8 minutes, and I did every minute on the minute. I would do as many pull-ups as I could do. And I say because it wasn't like a max effort, but I might have 2 or 3 reps left in the tank. So maybe that first minute I get 6 pull-ups, and then I rest for the next 45 seconds. And I do that 8 times. And I would do the same thing with push-ups, same thing with pull-ups. And then I would still do my running on either side. And then my goal was each month I would add 1 to 2 more minutes of it. So it's been pretty straightforward with it. I kept track of each round of how many reps I'm getting. So like in that same month, maybe I did my 8 sets of 5 on pull-ups. Maybe now I'm trying to get 4 sets of 6 and 4 sets of 5, and then trying to just progress that way. But right now it's March, and I'm into a month where I'm doing 14 minutes of my pull-ups and push-ups. And my squats actually I've just kept at 12 because I've been able to get all the squats in that time. So I'm just keeping it at that level and making sure my body can do it consistently and recover from it well. And then April, I'm planning on doing 16. And then May, somewhere in that same range. And the reason I came up with these numbers too is I thought my goal is to do it in under an hour. So if I think I can get my mile done in 9 minutes, I just gave my time on the front end and the back end. That gives me 15 minutes to do the pull-ups, 15 minutes for the push-ups, and then about 12 for the squats. As long as I'm at that as a cap or below it, I know I'm going to hit my goal.
That's awesome. I think that it's funny, but you're taking like a lot of, I think it's any good training, but I think it's like what I preach when I teach students about rehab. It's start with the end in mind, like put a date on the calendar. It's a target. In this case, it's not really movable because that's kind of the day that the workout happens, but other things can be flexible, and then work backwards and set goals and set criteria so you know if you're ahead or behind pace so that you can adjust as needed. So that's really interesting. And I think that taking the time to prepare, especially coming off an injury that you had, is really smart and probably something that many people could take. There's probably lots of people that did the Murph last year and had some type of knees flared up from the squats, Achilles flared up from the runs, elbows flared up from the pull-ups, whatever the case may be. Totally fine, just one day. But I would suggest like learning from that, because if you didn't do anything differently this year, you're probably going to have the same thing or maybe even a little worse.
Yeah, absolutely. My goal is to do this with the vest. I did actually start out my training with no vest at all. I just wanted to get used to my body weight. Then I put in a 10-pound plate and started working with that for a little bit. Now for the past 2 months, I've been using the full 20. I'm going to be honest, that first like month, maybe even 2 months of working on it, these workouts felt pretty easy to me. Like I absolutely could have hit it harder. But I think when we talk about what do I see people do wrong is maybe their fitness level is pretty high. So they start hitting it pretty hard. And now they just are pretty stagnant for months, or they're just doing too much. But I started out and it was honestly really easy workouts. Like I left feeling well recovered. It wasn't that bad. Now I'm at a point that I actually do need a few days to recover from it. So in terms of like how I structure it in my week 2, this is my hard day. My day after is a relatively easy, just like low intensity cardio day. And then even the day after that's relatively easy. So I have spaced out my like easy recovery days after, just because I know that this is my priority. And this is usually my hardest workout of the week too.
Yeah, I think that's really smart. And we talk about that a lot of times, like keep your high days high and your low days low. Like make sure you don't just hit it hard 3 or 4 days a week. So if you're behind in your training or you haven't started training for the Murph, the answer isn't to do the Murph 5 days a week from here through Memorial Day to prepare yourself. I know running for you, it's something that you've done before. You've trained to run miles, things like that. We have another podcast with Jack Hackett that's a running coach on how to run your fastest mile. But anything specifically on the mile side, if you have a specific time target you want to hit there that you'd suggest or that you've used to try to prepare for that section of the Murph?
Yeah, that is a good question too. So I have guessed at getting my mile at a 9 minute on either end, which I set those targets to hopefully be like easily achievable. Like I can run probably close to a 6 minute mile without a vest at this point, but I don't want to like redline those miles because I've done that in the past and it really makes the rest of the Murph workout like actually significantly harder. So my goal is to make those relatively easy or give me leeway in case I happen to be behind on the actual like lift portion, if you will. And then also being that I'm going to be running with a vest, I think there is a decent amount of risk that's posed with running with added weight. So I don't really do that much running with the vest. I've run 2 total miles, like 1 mile, 2 separate times with a vest so far, just to get a feel of it. But I don't anticipate doing much at all of my running with the vest on. But I will try to, when I'm doing them body weight, maybe do them slightly faster. Or a lot of times what I've been doing is instead of 1 mile after the Murph, I might do 2 or even up to 3 just to acclimate myself to more running, but at a slower pace and without a vest, just because I don't think the risk is worth running a bunch of training with the vest on. But then additionally, just to get used to like the weight on the shoulders, I've been doing walks with the vest on, just like ways that are a lot less impact that I think pose less risk that I could start developing like a knee discomfort or Achilles or something like that. So outside of those days, I do run usually 2 other days a week. One's more of like an interval day just because I like to have those high intensity runs in still. And then the other day, now that I'm done playing basketball, has been just like a really low intensity. This week I ran up to 3 miles, but it's going to be like a longer run day.
Yeah. No, I think that's really smart and good advice. And yeah, the weighted running is for one day to do 2 miles if you're relatively fit. Not probably a huge deal, but if you do that over time, like brings some concerns with tendons and bones. I want to transition to talk about like injuries and injury prevention strategies, recovery. And one of the keys is that you've already hit on is the duration of training, how you schedule your week, building in some recovery time, things like that. But anything else that you've started incorporating into recovery days, warm-ups, cool downs, anything like that on the injury prevention, mobility type side?
Yeah. So especially on my like Murph days, my warm-ups usually are, I've always been consistent with warm-ups. That's never been a problem with me. And it typically hits at the main areas that either I've dealt with injuries in the past, I'm notoriously stiff in, or I feel like I'm weaker in. But I count a Murph day as like an upper body day for me. And so all it consists of is the workout is the push-ups and pull-ups. So sometimes it's either as part of my like warm-up, I will do some like scap or rotator cuff specific warm-ups. I've actually been noticing like my left lat getting a little tighter and overhead. So I've been incorporating some like lat flexibility and like incorporating some low level strength with the lat as like a warm up to try to stay preventative there. And then this is just specific to me, but dealing with the past elbow injuries, I've kept up with doing some level of like isometric work to my elbow. But then on my other upper body day, I try to hit at the things I don't train during the Murph. So I might do more vertical pressing because I'm only doing horizontal pressing that day. I might incorporate more horizontal pulling because I'm only doing vertical pulling on that Murph day. I'm essentially trying to make sure like some of my scap work or cuff work is in there too, that I'm not just doing the same thing over and over for months, but I do have variety throughout the week too. And then from a lower body standpoint, like it is a ton of volume on the squats. So I make sure on some of those other lower body days that I have too, that I'm doing plenty of proximal like hip work, some hamstring work, like a lot of calf, because I've actually dealt with some Achilles issues in the past too. So a lot of it's specific to me and what I've dealt with in the past, but then it's also trying to take into account what is the style of trainings or areas that I'm not getting in with the Murph that I want to supplement throughout the rest of the week.
Yeah. No, I think that's smart. And I think it's something that maybe people don't always pick up on because I think it's really popular to like whatever sport, an injury prevention program or an arm care routine for baseball players or sell a Murph injury prevention program, things like that. And the truth is that those things need to be specific to the person. Like if you've had patellar tendonitis, like you should probably do stuff to care for that tendon or in your case, the forearms, right? If you've had these issues previously, those are your highest risk areas for those to redevelop. That's the number one factor of future injury. So then that's where it's like in the extra time targeting those areas that you know have been problematic for you to try to stay ahead of the curve and not fall behind and go through that same cycle. So I think that's really good advice. Let's talk about the day of. So you're obviously, this is going to be, it sounds like the first one that you're trying to go full bore, weight vest in the correct order, not scaling it at all. But I've done this many times beforehand. So what would be some ways that you'd suggest to modify or scale the workout if your fitness level isn't as high? Maybe you've never done it before, or you just want to participate but don't want to risk injury, or you just can't do some of the movements?
Yeah, it is a great question because I do the Murph usually at the gym that we're at here, and I get to see a lot of different fitness levels participate in it, both friends and just people I've never met before. And the nice thing is, we're not doing this for time to put up on a board and be competitive necessarily, unless it's with yourself. So like you can show up and do whatever version that you think you could do. So if that's doing half the total volume, you could do that too. Otherwise, like instead of normal push-ups, you can do, I've seen plenty of people do hands elevated on a bench push-up, or I've even seen people do dumbbell overhead press. Essentially, they're just trying to get some exercise to fill whatever their fitness level is for that particular one. And then pull-ups are notoriously really hard one. So I've seen plenty of people that might do band-assisted versions, or maybe they'll do like a TRX row instead, because that'll be a lot easier. Or I've even seen people do dumbbell rows. But then the squats, usually most people will do to some degree. Technically, you're supposed to go like full depth, but you can obviously modify the depth there. You could modify how many you're doing. But then most people will try to do the full 1 mile runs. But even still, if you choose to bike instead, if maybe impact isn't good for you, biking is definitely an option, or even doing just like a walking mile or a walking portion of the mile. The nice thing is there is tons of ways to be able to modify it for your fitness level. And I guess in the talk of what do people do wrong, sometimes it's force feeding too much, not knowing that they can modify it, and it is a-okay to, because probably half the people do modify it. But there's so many ways in terms of the volume or the intensity of the exercise that you can fit to you.
Yeah. I think that's really smart. Knowing I think you said it perfectly, like compete against yourself. Remember why you're there. You're there to remember the people that have served and honor them. It's supposed to be a fun community activity, not something that buries you and takes you out of training for months at a time. So compete with yourself, not the person next to you, and it really just have fun doing the day.
Absolutely. It's a great environment to do. If anyone's never done the Murph before and you're going to take good time to prep for it, it's a great environment. It's a nice cause, and you always get to push yourself too.
Yeah, that's awesome. So where's the Murph going to be done this year?
Hopefully at B. I've talked with a couple of people here. It's either going to be down at Bark River again, or I've talked with a couple of the trainers that maybe they'll do a little bit of a group too. But the goal would be that we're going to do it here at B, and then we'll have a decent group together. So we'll have a good environment going together too.
That's awesome. Thank you for taking your time. I hope that everyone was able to take something away from this, even if you haven't started prepping for the Murph in October. By the time this podcast comes out, you're still going to be over a month away from the actual day of the event. So there's still plenty of time to start doing something. And even if it is just doing what Brett did and just testing yourself out and seeing where are you strong, where are you weak, maybe starting to plan through what are those modifications that you might need to do to complete it going to be, and just preparing it that way. Too many times we see injuries that come up from people that are doing too much too quickly after doing too little for too long, where you haven't done any of this stuff in a while. You haven't done this volume, you just haven't prepared your body, you shock the system, and the outcome is not awesome. So take some of the guidance from Brett, maybe start planning one workout a week, start targeting some of those weaker areas, maybe mix in some extra work on previous injuries. Or if you're currently like dealing with some pain as you're preparing for it, please feel free to reach out to our office. We do free injury consults. Brett obviously knows exactly what you're going through and is able to give you kind of guidance on what should you be doing so that you don't have this setback. Good luck to everyone that's going to participate this year. I think it's an awesome cause and a really good fitness event to be a part of. So if you enjoyed this podcast, we appreciate a like and a share it with a friend. Hopefully we can help our community stay a little bit healthier. And in the meantime, we'll see you guys on the next episode.